everyone, and welcome to Ops Oops Origami. It's been a little while, but at the same time, I mean, we've been doing this for a little over a year. So this is the first time that we're also streaming somewhere other than YouTube live. Uh, we our videos are also syndicated to Rumble, but that's with a delay. Can't actually go live there yet. I think you need I don't remember how many subs you need, but we don't have enough. So I think there's a link in the doobly doo. Go over there and like our stuff if you have an account. Yes. uh, but beyond that, we are also streaming to LinkedIn and Facebook. I don't know why we never bothered doing this before. Probably because we're IT geeks and not content creators.
Right.
So, Chris, how's it
Platforming up,
going?
not our way. It's going well. It's going well. And it's been a little while, but not crazily long.
Yeah, a couple weeks.
Um, Indeed. Like less time than the last time. So, uh, uh, thanks for joining us. Oh,
Yes.
look, we're already up to 5. We're doing well.
Yeah. See.
This is super fun. We can actually watch who's watching on which streams.
Can we?
Yep, check your eyeball.
Oh, okay. There we go. Okay, a couple from YouTube. I mean, a couple from Facebook. That's probably.
Right.
So,
So,
anyways.
for the viewers at home, in our studio here, we have like some feedback options, the things that let us do tickers and captions and whatnot. We also get some stats on the video, and one of them is just a little bit of viewership stuff. So kind of cool. So anyway, how you been?
Not too bad. Just working. I back to the standard 612s, maybe 512s, whatever.
Right. I mean, when they pay you more for more hours worked, it can be real tempting.
Yes. I mean, so previously being salary, I mean, I was working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks, and I mean, you don't get paid for that extra time. Now, I do get paid for that extra time, and I'm perfectly content working it. I mean, I love what I do, so here we
Right.
are.
I mean, it's interesting. This correlation or analogy didn't occur to me until just now. But the modern contract IT worker, honestly, any contract worker is very much like, it's like farming. You got to make hay when the sun shines, right?
Yeah.
So, um, so yeah, that's good stuff. Um, anyway, let's start off with a new thing. I was explaining this to you a little bit earlier, and I think it's a good idea. So the other night, I was out for dinner with my family, um, and we're getting close to the end of the dinner, and my son Killian, who's almost 7, turns to me and says, "Hey, Dad, I've got a question." I said, "Yeah." He says, "How does Wii Sports Resort know about the Mii's?" Now, if any of you aren't familiar with Wii, the Nintendo Wii system, one of the things you could do in there is you could create your little avatar, your Mii. Um, they're blocky, round little critters. You can make them look sort of like you in the way that like
Yeah.
3 ovals can look like anybody. Um, but it was a really interesting question because, like, in his estimation, the game learned about the me, right? And so I started to explain to him how video games work, and that like the Wii Sports Resort didn't actually have to know about the me. All it had to do was tell the Wii, "Hey, show a me," or show the me for the player that selected themselves. And then I was talking to him about like the property, like the me isn't actually a thing. It's just a list of properties that ultimately map to textures and
Yeah.
right. So, but the interesting thing is like over the course of maybe a 5 to 10 minute conversation, I got to explain a technical thing, and my wife is sitting across the table from us. Uh, and she says to me as I'm wrapping up this explanation, it's like, this should be a show topic. It's like, okay. Now, do I think everybody is interested in me waxing poetic about how video games work? Eh, uh, my son is certainly interested in it. He discovered that we own a Wii about, like, a month ago, and they're totally been into Portal for a while, or Portal 2, I should say. So, like, he's got some interest. He's 6. Um,
Yeah.
but it occurred to me that, like, we are an ops show. Um, there are some really commonly used texts that don't get explained very well often, like, um, BGP, ubiquitous in the environment. I don't really know it all that well. I'd love to have somebody explain it to me like I'm Killian, right? Um, DNS, the number of developers that just don't know anything about it really is shocking.
Which is weird. You'd think they'd pick something up along the way.
Right. But like,
It
unless you
actually,
have to.
PKI, so certificates,
Sure.
SSL certs. That
Right.
whole thing, for some reason, is like a dark art to people that should know it. And it's
Right.
simple. It's not super complex. I don't know why people don't know it. Same as DNS,
Right.
like you said.
Well, um, yeah, and like when you, encryption in general, like there's lots of different ways to do encryption. Understanding like, you know, PKI, it's actually in a lot of ways the simplest methodology in encryption. Like we're not talking about like signed and countersigned encryption packets. We're not talking about encrypted tunnels. It's it's pretty straightforward.
It really is pretty straightforward. But I feel like that would I'd need a whiteboard. Same with BGP, even to explain it to a 5-year-old or a six
Right.
year old.
So here's the game. And if you're watching now, later, whatever, please, please, please throw some stuff in the comments. Brian and I each have uh, over 25 years of experience in the industry. Um, we've got a pretty broad set of knowledge. We also have a ton of contacts within the industry from throughout our careers. Uh, if there's something that you want to know about at high level, like you've heard about it, or you've been working with it, or adjacent to it your entire career, or you're getting new into the industry and you want to know more about a thing, um, throw it out there. We'll try to give you a 5 to 10 minute little blurb about a thing that maybe you should know a little bit more about. Um,
Yeah.
now, I totally understand the desire to prep, but I think one of the things that was really interesting um, and forced me to keep things simple, honestly, with Killian is that I didn't have any time to prep. I know something about how video games work, right? Like I know that thing like Mii's, they're sprites. I know what textures are. And like as I'm trying to explain all this to him, the knowledge that I have is popping into my head so that I can explain exactly like so I can answer his question correctly, but without getting too detailed. Which is kind of
Mm.
beautiful because I am not an expert on how video games are developed by
No,
any
no.
means. Um, and I wouldn't call myself an encryption expert either, right? But I can explain encryption. I know how it works
Yeah.
in general and with enough specificity that I can like do some troubleshooting on it, right?
Yeah. In a practical manner, how it works. Because there's very few people that actually understand it well enough to implement it good. That's why you should never roll your own crypto libraries.
Right.
Always use ones that have already been vetted.
I mean, the same is true for basically anything in tech. Um, the real experts, the ones that could roll their own, um, already have,
Yeah, largely yes.
right? Like don't think you're going to write your own DNS implementation. You're maybe you get it right.
No, just steal one. Bind. Use bind.
Bind. Right. So, with that spirit in mind, we may murder this. But I'm going to say, Brian, let's explain DNS like I'm 7. I'm going to start us out.
Okay.
So, you know how you have a browser, Chrome, Edge, if you're super old, i.e., Netscape Navigator, right?
Yep.
You go in there and you go to your fancy address bar and you type in an address. The part in that address, like if you type in www.google.com, so that you can pull up everybody's favorite search engine, Bing people can go suck it. What happens, right? The first thing to understand is that like that www.google.com is a DNS address. By the way, welcome to the show, William.
How you doing, gentlemen?
Good. And yourself?
Good.
Oh, I can't complain. Successful change, always a good night.
Excellent.
Good.
So,
I don't know if you're watching, but we're about to partake in a new thing. Explain it like I'm 7?
Yeah, let's go.
So it's not Eli 5, it's Eli 7.
Slightly more.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this all came out of a question that my son asked me about a relatively technical topic that I felt like I had to explain to him on the fly about like how video games work. And it was an interesting experience. My wife thought it was a good idea. So we're going to try it out. So our soup du jour for this very brief segment is DNS. How does DNS work for a 7-year-old audience? Right? So to pick up where I left off, you type the address google.com or www.google.com into a browser. That google.com piece is a DNS address, right? And DNS is effectively the phone book of the internet. Now, for a 7-year-old, they don't know what a phone book is.
Or
There's 20-year-olds that don't know what one is.
Fair enough. So let's say this. You have a cell phone. Your friends have a cell phone. You know your cell phone number. And they know their cell phone number. But you're not going to know it. You don't remember it. It gets typed into your phone. Your phone has a list of phone numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you want to call William, I don't know your cell phone number.
That's actually a great way to think about it, because a contact list, the phone doesn't care what the name of it is. It's just a label.
Right.
But but if you search for a name, it will have a phone number if it has an entry.
Correct. And we'll get into this in the analogy, I think. If it doesn't have a name, it's going to have a problem. It's going to be like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, man. Your browser does you a solid and says, oh, I don't know what that is. Do you want me to search for it? But so think your phone and how your contact names map to a number. Well, the internet works the same way, right? Like the internet ultimately works on numbers, IP addresses. There's a lot of them, way more digits in IP addresses than in cell phone numbers. So there is effectively a giant contact list on the internet that's shared amongst the entire internet for how to get to a specific contact, a web address. That system is DNS. So when your browser gets the input of a name, it actually then goes on to a subsystem in your computer, which is the DNS client. Its job is to either look within its own temporarily stored set of information, or if it doesn't have it, to go ask somebody that knows more. It'd be like calling.
It's short-term memory.
It is short-term memory.
Does it? Does it know that? Does it know that phone number because it just used it to stay on the
Right.
phone number thing? Then I can look at. Then I can call it without having to look it up.
Right. Let's use the internet as an example, right? So, um, I want to call. Um, I want to call and book a flight on an airline, right? Why I'm calling and not just booking on the website, I don't know. But I've decided I want to call. So I go on the internet and I look up a phone number, right? What do? I type that phone number into my phone, right? Um, Now, if I then want to call back within the next couple of days, it's in my recent history. I can find it pretty easy, right? But let's say that I'm super weird and I like to clear my history on my phone periodically. If I clear that history, then I have to go back to the internet to look up that phone number again. Your computer does the same thing. It's super weird. It likes to clear its history. Um, and so if it doesn't have it in its history, it has to go out and find this thing called a DNS server. Hopefully, the DNS server it talks to has that information. But if it doesn't, the DNS server does the same exact thing and it goes and looks stuff up. Usually not more than like 1 or 2 layers deep, but eventually it can get to this thing called a root server, which holds a portion of the addresses on the internet. They're divided up by letter. um, and they're, if I'm remembering correctly, there are 13 of them. It splits them up. Each root server gets 2. And so when you look up an address on the internet, if your DNS server doesn't have it, it goes off and looks at the root server and finds the address, brings it back to you, hands it back to your web browser, and off she goes.
So the root servers don't actually have results. They tell you where to look
That's
for
right.
the answer. They tell you what name server to actually hit.
That's
So
correct. So modifying that, thank you, Brian. The root servers know about this thing called an authority, the start of authority location for your address. All of those are logged. So what the root server is going to do is going to say, hey, you want to know about this address? I can tell you to go talk to this guy. It's like, hey, Brian, I know you know that number for an airline. Can you tell me what it is? And Brian, who's the authority on airline phone numbers, can tell me. Now, William, on the other hand, might be an authority on, great restaurants to go to or places to buy a car. So if I want to get a phone number for a place to buy a car, I'm going to talk to William. And me, I'm just the guy that knows who knows stuff. Like I'm the root server, right? I don't know anything about buying cars or airplanes, but I know who to tell you to talk to.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
What did we miss? Well, how do the start of authority servers get that information?
From the registrars.
Okay. What's
Basically,
a registrar?
when you purchase a DNS name, you tell it where your root servers are.
Right.
And then they put that in. Yeah, they they put that in the actual root servers, and then you could subdelegate from there. But
Right.
that's.
I think the only thing you missed is that you did an Eli 7. This is more like Eli 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for
We'll
a
try better.
7-year-old systems person. Well, it's a working concept. Well,
Right.
next time.
So next time. So maybe in the next one of the next episodes, or maybe we'll prep a little bit on this, and we'll actually get my 7-year-old to ask some questions. I'm sure if I talk to him about enough stuff and tell him that we're going to record him, he'll actually have some interesting questions. They may not be any topic that we particularly thought we were going to discuss, but he'll have some questions.
That's fair enough.
Never
So
give
you guys-
that kid an ask me anything.
So what have you guys been up to? It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been.
It
Probably
has.
been. It hasn't been a year since you've been on, but it's been
It's pretty close. I mean, I've seen you in
a long time.
in real life a couple times since then, but it's probably been almost a year since I've been on. Your computer
Depends on
doesn't.
the implementation.
Yep. Your computer doesn't.
If you have two DNS entries for the same thing, your computer will just rotate between them
Yep.
and round robin them, and then half the time your request will work and half the time it will fail, and you'll be very confused.
Or it'll
And
work.
some servers, if they have two answers, will flip on their side as well.
So that's generally the implementation that I've seen. Clients generally don't get multi-responses unless you do really specific things. Like if you have a tool for querying DNS records, you can get multiple records back,
Well,
right?
Yeah.
But when you're talking
Even
about
an
like,
NS lookup will give you the multiple
right,
Where
answers, but not necessarily all of them. It depends on intermediate servers, who's resolving it.
right,
where you'll get into more trouble is when you have your reverse DNS, where the computer is doing a request to look up a list of names via IP address, and someone decides that your server, in this case a vCenter server, needs to have 3 different names to the same IP address, and it really makes a bad time when you try to upgrade it because it gets really confused.
That is unnecessary.
So to
Really,
bring us
those
back to the
reverses
analogy-
should be 1-to-1 in almost every case.
right. So for the 7-year-olds in the audience, that reverse is like caller ID, right? Like, why would I ever want to
Yes.
know who's associated with a number? Well, like when you get the spam call or the suspected spam call, you want to know if it's real or not, right? So like maybe you go look up the number. It's like, oh yeah, that's actually Microsoft. I was waiting for their call. Or, oh yeah, that's straight out of Nigeria, and I haven't done anything in Nigeria, so probably don't need to take that. But yeah, my experience is that when you're dealing with DNS tools, they will give you multiple results. But when you're dealing with clients that are interested in getting somewhere, instead of just knowing about DNS, they specifically request one address, and if they get multiple back, they just take the first one.
Usually.
The DNS server frequently round robins things. It's not perfect, but like
No,
it's
there's
random.
no availability checking, and yeah, it's
Now there are some cool new
imperfect.
services that do availability checking and control their responses
Yeah.
based on it.
Yeah, like GSLB.
Right.
I don't like Traffic Manager being called cool technology.
But it is. Like, it may be the best thing that Azure has to offer.
Maybe.
Depends on how you use it.
Right. No, you can totally abuse it, right? But like, it's a somewhat intelligent DNS, but it's not overly intelligent. And that's actually one of its strengths, right? Like, don't use it as a load balancer because it's not.
No.
Right?
No.
But it
Despite those words being in the name, yeah.
Well, but it's a traffic manager. It's not a load balancer.
Well, when you're using it for
like-
DNS, it's GSLB, and load balancer is in the name, but it's an awful. It's not
Okay,
really load
okay.
balancing.
Okay.
Load distribution, not even session distribution. Yeah,
Yeah.
depends on how good your checking is.
I was
Go ahead.
wondering why I got a message to invite me on the show today, and I'm looking at the topic, going, what I just told Chris about yesterday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
well, we can roll into
so-
that.
So let's get into it. So Brian, I got a question for you. Why can't you say no to messed up environments?
Oh
And
God, I
William,
don't know.
why can't you say no to messed up environments? And
I'll,
I know it's true
uh,
for both of you, way more than for me.
yeah. That's
Go-
why I was
go ahead,
somewhere for 11 years. I thought I could fix it. I mean, I try, and things were under constant improvement, and I wouldn't change it. I would still try and do that at a new place or somewhere else. But I can't help myself. I see a problem, I want to fix it.
Right. So actually, this is one of my favorite analogies in IT. I think that in a lot of things, the like dating relationship analogy works really well for actually for companies in general and IT in general, right? Like, um, you both have heard me use the abusive boyfriend analogy for bad vendors,
Yeah.
right? They abuse you, they do awful things to you, you call them out on it, and they, of course, they claim, I'll never do it again. And do they? Of course they
No.
do. They're abusive, right? Like, th- it's not just common wisdom because it's a trope. It's common wisdom because it's true. Unless somebody seeks real help, if they are abusive, they will continue to be abusive. And if they lose a subject for abuse, they're just going to move on to somebody else. Or maybe they move on to somebody else and leave their former victim behind, right? Um, but just like every victim of this stuff that sticks with them, like they do things, companies do things to convince themselves like this time it will be different. And it never is. It frequently gets worse. And like, call me insensitive or inappropriate or disrespectful to those that are abused, which like I give them tons of support. But now that my PC statement is out of the way, what I'll say is there's two ways that, you know, an abused person gets out of this. They either wise up or they get dead, right? Like, so don't let your vendor kill you. Wise up.
Yeah.
You got to leave. So you guys
And
that want to change a person, different analogy. Like everybody thinks they can change the bad boy. You can't.
jeez.
It,
And so when it comes to vendors, yeah, absolutely, I agree. That for every vendor, there's 10 more just itching to take their place. People don't
And
realize that that's the same thing with relationships, but that's neither here nor there. Now, in your perspective, this is about vendors. For me, it's more the company that you're working at, not necessarily an outside force. I mean, for me, it's like consulting gigs,
right,
and most of them aren't that bad. It's just me. First off, I like the challenge. If everything's running well, I'm bored as shit, and I won't want to be there. I'm gonna be hating life. So I like the
right,
challenge. And then it's just my natural drive to fix things and make things better.
right,
And most places, either you're given the power to make changes and fix things, or you're not. If you're not, and you're just stuck with shit piled on top of shit, well, yeah, okay, get out of there. But if you have room to move and can actually make things better, man, it
it,
feels
it works
excellent
best.
to
Right,
turn a shit show into a properly working network, firewall, whatever, systems.
right. Like, so here's the deal. There are absolutely people out there that don't want to deal with fixing stuff on day to day, but there's a ton of people that do. Like, I think most
Yeah.
doctors are in it not to see healthy people, right?
No.
They're in it to see people that need their help. Like, if all you're doing is like checkups and like, hey, you're super healthy, way to go. Like, what are you, my my personal cheerleader about my health? Like, no.
Those are
Like,
important too, but
They are.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
But most doctors, like, they're happy to have the patients and their customers that are healthy, and they can say, you know what, you're doing great. You're not like the other, 70% of the people that come to see me on a daily basis. Because that's the reality, is that most people go to see their doctor because there's something wrong. And that's why you get into it if you're a doctor. Or at least I would imagine. Maybe there are some doctors like, I'm a surgeon. And I do surgery on the 99% of the patients that come to see me. But what I really enjoy is the patients that come to see me, and I can tell them, actually, you don't need surgery. Just, you just do this exercise and you'll be fine. That's what I live for, right? No. No. Problem solvers are universal. You don't Why stick around with something that's perfect if you're a problem solver?
something that's kind of interesting, the fact that like 3 analogies that I've heard in the last couple of days have come up in this conversation.
Really?
Yeah. So I was reading a Reddit article talking about the proliferation of people on, like, basically they were calling it the ADD spectrum, but I'm like, I don't think I've ever heard it called that before. But the tendency for people with executive dysregulation of some kind to end up in the IT field, and what that actually says about them and what it says about IT. And for a lot of them, they're talking about, if I had to sit around and do documentation, I'm bored off my mind. I can't get myself working. But that constant interruption that leans into your regular thought of inability to stay on task, and has that adrenaline, chasing the adrenaline monster when it comes to, like, system outages and things like that, and the thing that you can fix these issues and it makes you feel good about yourself. People with executive dysregulation of any kind of find it hard to find that in real life when they're on their own, and to get it as part of your job is kind of is rewarding.
Yeah.
And a coworker of mine was actually just talking about doctors, and he's like, I do the same thing as a doctor. He's like, but I couldn't handle someone dying in the operating table. I don't think I'd be able to live with myself. And he's like, you realize as a doctor, it's like not all of them make it out. It's like you he's like, as an IT professional, I won't fix everything, but I can think that I'll fix everything. As a doctor, if you think you're going to fix everyone, you're going to break real fast, because it's not true.
I can imagine.
Yeah, but there's no surgeon that goes into surgery thinking, yeah, this guy's not going to make it.
No, you always think you go in, yeah, but
right. Intellectually, you understand that you're going to lose some, and when you do, that acts as a safety net for you. But it's got to be a gut punch when it happens, because you have to go in thinking, I can help. I think that's true for IT too, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
As far as why do you stick around for busted environments? I don't know if I get more out of setting up a new system versus fixing an old one. If I'm allowed to do a new system and take the time to learn said system and actually set it up properly, at a previous job, I was asked to manage a Hyper-V environment for a long time, and about 5 years into that regime, I got to build a whole new one from scratch: new SAN, new servers, new switches. I got to pick all the parts, and there was a lot of pride in building a system that basically stood up and hit the ground running. And it was like, I told you, it's like you're this piece of crap the whole time you have to be working on. But there was also a lot of pride in keeping that old system working as well as it could. So I mean, there's some in both. You tend to get more of that when you have a busted old system, because it tends to make itself apparent, like, hey, you need to fix me now, rather than waiting for the money tree to rain down some project money.
I mean,
yeah,
that's
and
true.
There's definitely. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian, because I'm going to call you. I'm going to wait for you to say something that's going to let me call you both out. So go ahead.
Well, because a lot of times, I mean, it's not that throwing money is at problem is a solution, but sometimes the way to get rid of that busted old system is to build something new, and a lot of times you build that being able to look back at all the mistakes that were made
Mm.
previously that you've seeded everything, and now I get to build it right. I've seen all the mistakes. I've seen all the things not to do. And now I get to build it right in my vision. And hopefully that works out for you. Sometimes it doesn't. But so I mean, part of it is keeping the busted working when you have zero resources or minimal resources. But then there's also replacing the busted with not busted.
Mm.
Sure. There's also the fixing the busted, right? I've done this, and I've seen both of you do it. I think for at least half of IT professionals, there's an aspect of there's a thing that's kind of broken. It works well enough. You know its boundaries, you know what you can rely on it for and what you can't rely on it for. But like you still know that at the end of the day, it's really kind of busted, right? And that will needle at your brain forever and
Oh,
ever.
Absolutely.
And then someday there's really no margin in fixing it, but you do anyway.
True.
Which brings me to the thing that William faced. I'm going to call out some things that maybe the Batteries Plus folks would rather I didn't. But this is not uncommon in the industry. They had an old domain that had a lot of ghosts in the closet. It had been through a bunch of various iterations and things, and eventually got so messed up that a decision was made to replace it. And once it was
domain
replaced,
started as NT, I think it was 3.5. It might have been 4.
right? So there's your first problem.
Take that into consideration.
The GPO's created by date was 2000. So
Okay.
Well, interesting enough, that's probably when GPOs started, right? Or close
It's not
enough.
far off. Yeah,
right?
close enough.
NT4 had GPOs in some sort of form. So, yeah, it was a mess. I did a little bit of work to clean it up. I actually got Kerberos to work, which it had not been working for years. And then I was like, okay, I got it to be minimally functional and minimally secure. Now let's get off this thing. So, William, what compelled you to not say no to the broken world?
So the reason why I don't have a leg to stand on as far as saying no to the broken world is because I made the mistake of bringing our busted customized version of our backend POS system up into the new world and getting it run on server 2019. And then the next hurdle, there was some things done, and the next hurdle, the next hurdle now is, hey, you now that this is going to work for the foreseeable future, your next hurdle is that you're still running FRS for your replication topology in the domain, which stops working on 2016, and we're trying to go to server 2019. I told my boss, I'm like, well, you have a choice. We can either risk it for the biscuit and fix this thing, and because we tried to upgrade to DFSR, but there was a permission error because the user account permissions are all jacked up. It's some backend information.
It's probably all running as my account. Sorry.
No, for the background information, someone took the default domain controller policy, put all the user account rights in that, and drug it into the root of the domain.
No.
And the default domain policy was being used for something else, and the default domain controller policy was corrupted. Like the version in AD was not the same as the version in G. It was having a bad day. So.
Bad decade.
Yeah. So
no, seriously, I looked at these things when I was still there. I'm like, it's stable enough.
So
run.
So I told my boss, I'm like, well, we either need to fix this, or we either need to fix this, or I can take you to 2016, and I just won't be working here by the time it comes up for renewal again. I'm fine with that too, because that's 2027. That's like 5 more years. And so we got the okay. So last December we're like, we're gonna do this, and they're like, okay, well you should wait until like middle of February. So it came up. I've had a ticket running with Microsoft. We've been discussing how to do with this. So we actually took backups of the domain, backups of all the GPOs, and ran the DC GPO fix command, and deleted and regenerated the default domain policy and default domain controller policy, and moved them into the correct. And before I did this, I took all the user rights account settings and pushed them down into. There's this like monster policy that's controlling it for everything, which is a horrible security thing, but it's there and working. Pushed it all down. I went down to the servers, looked at the final state, made that final state become that GPO, basically cut the head out of the domain off for settings, and worked on it for a day. So I reset those, and we got into a bit of a problem because it's FRS, it's slow. And so the big difference between FRS and DFSR is FRS is not stateful. So it's just looking at files. So when you reset these things with that command, it's like, oh, here's another one. Oh, here's another, and it starts replicating. And we started getting permission errors, and group policy started breaking on the domain controllers. And we're messing around with it. We got Microsoft on the horn. They're trying to fix some things. He's like, well, we don't have FRS in the lab anymore because it's so old. You have to put in a ticket for that. But we end up in this situation where I'm like, okay, my GPO is my group policies update is busted. You need to show me how to fix this. And he starts having me delete the files and replace them like while replication is running. And I'm like, this is a terrible idea. But we did this, and eventually we got like 8 copies of the default domain policy in there with the NTRFS, like just bad copies. So we deleted them all, and we did a couple more copies, and we left it alone. Because what was happening is we had a Mexican standoff. We have 4 domain controllers. The one we fixed was working, the one we were on was working, the next one we'd fix, and then the 4th one would break, and it was going around in a circle. And we waited long enough that it fixed itself. And we said, okay, so we backed off and let it sit for about 2 hours. Replication smoothed out. I only had 3 weird artifacts in my sysfall folder, which I'm like, I can deal with those after I upgrade my replication topology. But the default domain policy is doing what default domain policies are supposed to do. The domain controller policy is back in the domain controllers. The all server user rights assignment giant GPO is out of the domain controllers. It's in a much better place. It's working. And here's the fun part. I'm actually taking what Chris set up and what you guys set up in the new domain, and I'm actually doing it a little bit better and cleaner because like that's
not hard.
I know, but the current the new domain has like, hey, we're doing it this way, and then it was like, hey, maybe that wasn't such the greatest way to do it, but that's the way we're doing it, so get it going. So now I'm rebuilding all these old servers, and it's like that, but super clean. And it's like, God, the old junky domain's gonna look better than the new domain here in like a year.
You know what? That is the beauty of improvements. Like, you can have a great idea, but they can be improved upon.
It was an all-day meeting. People were like shaking their heads at me. Like I was getting a little rowdy with some of my team. They were like, "You need to take a walk. You need to take a break." And I'm like, "Just be quiet. You need to think." Like, sometimes it's good to get up and walk around and take a break, and sometimes you're like hanging on something that you just like, if I leave this, I'm going to lose it.
Yeah. Stop talking. I need to concentrate for just. I need 30 seconds of everybody to shut the fuck up.
Like, so, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Yes.
Right.
But yeah, we're gonna get there.
Hey, no, like for those of you that don't know, I've worked with a lot of domains in my career. I've done a fair amount of consulting. Like I've seen a lot of domains, and I've been in some awful scenarios, and all of my like spidey sense is like, don't do it, William. Don't do it. But what I will say is I now have 3 examples of William plucking the golden egg from the morass of just like stinky crap and going, here's your shiny gold egg.
What were your not to bring? What were your other ones?
So that one, bringing those POS servers back from extinction
Oh,
because
all going to be
right,
counterpoint stuff.
right. And honestly, just getting to the point where you can install in 2019, like that one wasn't so bad.
We're not.
That was more of a political minefield
Yeah,
than anything.
we're not installing on 2019 because we don't actually have the installer working. What we did is we found a way, we managed to do an in-place upgrade, and then sysprepped it and worked through the issues that came out from sysprepping it.
That's what I said, Brian.
That's
what I said.
The primary issue with sysprepping it was that sysprep rips out all the machine certificates, and that software uses its own machine certificate. So I had to open the installer and find the MPQ and write a script to grab use the little line from and actually use that MPQ and reinstall the certificate. But we can now make clean installs of those application servers and of the management servers and all that stuff.
So I just want to PSA for everybody. If you are at all functional in the IT world and you have a stinky, horrible problem, William is the A team. If you've got a problem and you can find him and you can afford him, maybe you can hire the William team. Because dude's magic. I'd pat you on the back right now, but seriously, I've pulled some stuff out of my keister. I've solved some problems, but yeah, you stone cold.
I have my moments.
When William walks,
and humble too.
Yeah, no, seriously, when he walks, he clangs because the biggest brass balls. But just remember, folks, and William, there is nothing more permanent than a temporary solution.
I get to quote that every week.
Yes.
I have people where I'm at now quoting it. The first time one of them heard it was like, I love that. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a friend of
Chris,
mine.
I have something for you.
Go ahead, Brian.
That came from a DBA at my first real network engineer job. Grigory Godkin.
Ooh.
He was an Oracle DBA back at the Olson Company, and yeah, that's just one of those things that came out of his mouth and stuck in my brain and has never left. I've heard variants before, but that was the first time, and that was 22 years ago now. But yeah.
As we saw in chat, don't fix a behavior issue with a text solution. Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
So, and between that and something you had said earlier, William, it makes me think. So there's a saying in photography: anything that doesn't add to a photograph detracts from a photograph. It's kind of the same for IT solutions. Anything that doesn't add to the solution detracts to it or detracts from it. Just more in the wrong, arbitrary complexity added on for no real gain. Keep it simple, stupid.
Right. Drive to simplicity.
Yes.
Every day.
Simple is beautiful.
Absolutely.
Hell, that goes back into don't turn the wanker knobs.
Don't turn the wanker knobs. Yeah. Don't ask for the wanker knobs either, because it just means you're a wanker. Just saying.
It's nice to have them, but know when to use them and know when not to.
All right, William, you've got a thing for me.
Oh, yeah, not too deep into this, but self-hosted Azure agents. You had a couple of those before you left.
Yeah. So, little background for those of you that don't know. Azure has various features, particularly Azure DevOps. that they will sell you agents that you can use, right? But they also have the option that you can host your own for whatever reason. For instance, they're the ones that they'll sell you can't do things like GUI testing, right? So if you want to do a testing agent on in an Azure DevOps pipeline, you can't really do that very effectively on their agents. So you need to build your own and install your own GUI stuff and whatnot. And then you can do like full on GUI click testing. It's scripted, it's a beautiful thing. But man, they're a little bit of a mess to set up.
So after several months of messing around with this, the containerization POC that we were working on kind of turned into a Docker POC for working with these agents.
I might drink all of this talking about this, by the way.
And just recently, I haven't turned them over to the owner of that project yet, but within the last 2 weeks, I finalized an agent or a Docker build that uses a Windows container, installs Chrome, installs the agent, pulls up the current versions of Chrome and Windows, and it checks for patching when it builds.
Nice.
And now stands up on its own, and we're running like 4 agents like on 2 machines on this thing. So whenever he needs a new version of Chrome or a new version of with Windows updates installed on the container, you just hit a single script and it rebuilds it all.
See, that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So self-hosted agents just rely on actually a pretty simple piece of software that Microsoft provides you that phone home. And as long as you give it the appropriate encryption key and the appropriate target names, it'll just go in like, hey, I'm part of the group now. So like containers are beautiful because who wants to maintain an agent for, days, months, years when you can just turn them up when you need them? And like, if you use containers, they'll just update. Like, hey, I'm the latest and greatest. I'm awesome.
Windows, the fact that it had to be a Windows container hurt a lot.
I mean,
a lot. The team was like, we don't know how to do this in Linux. I'm like, it's just a Selenium Docker, which there's like a million of them. Just learn how to use it. They're like, we're using VSTS Test Lab. I'm like, okay, so you're using a tool and you just refuse to use like the industry standard. Thanks. I guess I'll work around your inability to do any of the stuff. Windows container it is. 20 or 16 gig Docker image.
Yeah.
Working beautifully now, though. I mean, it was rough for a while, like because for a while we were downloading the offline installer and copying it in, and you had to run it twice, and it's just now it's a single shot. Finally,
right.
It took months to get that working that way. It also did help that I didn't have an actual project for it, so it was like, when can you scrounge up some time?
Hey, fun story. You now have a capability that basically every automation engineer wants. Because like automation engineers are good at writing automation tests and things like that, but not a lot of them actually understand infrastructure. They're far more aligned with developers than they are with infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So the ability to like build up a Docker cluster and create containers that can run test automations that's pretty sweet. Makes testing way cheaper.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, your test rig, even if you're doing smoke tests, you need them for like 30 minutes a day. And if you're not doing smoke tests, like you need them for 30 minutes a month.
Mm-hmm.
Did my change break the software?
Often, yes.
So my week, my 2 weeks in IT, you all know my attitude towards Microsoft cases. I got to do 2 of them. Actually, I'm still in the middle of one.
What was the occasion?
Well, the first one, Azure Front Door, their WAF firewall CDN solution, which it's an innovative concept. But like many Microsoft things that are complex, not, in my estimation, not particularly well implemented.
A basket that can hold all the eggs was also an innovative concept.
Yes, and if Microsoft had built it, it would have had a lot of holes in it. Holes large enough for eggs to fall through. And then we're like, well, just don't put
That's
the
a
eggs
user
there.
problem.
Just don't put the eggs there.
Maybe you're using it wrong.
So my current employer uses Front Door, and we had the weirdest behaviors. And it was not happy. And we finally tracked it to Front Door. The instances that we were on were having real problems. Well, the instance we had been on had hardware failures, so they moved us. And the new instances we were on were not dealing well with the increased load or something. And it took Microsoft a shockingly long time to find out about this. Like, apparently, when we called and had them finally look into it, after they'd looked into it for a little while, they finally were like, oh, yeah, we do have a problem.
Is this that like 4 out of 6 instances we're having an issue problem from a while back?
No. That's a different animal entirely.
Okay.
So, I mean, I feel a little bad because, like, as an IT guy, I believe in science and things, but also as an operations and systems guy, not a network guy, systems guy, I also am a little superstitious. Right? If I'm a network guy, there's no such thing as superstitions. It's all a bunch of hooey. But as a systems guy, I'm like, there's just some stuff you can't explain.
Yeah, lucky foot and
right, like knock on wood. So they tell me that before I got there, they never had any problems for like 2 or 3 years.
Oh.
Which is possible.
They didn't have adequate monitoring in place to know if they had problems or not.
It's been a lot quieter since you moved on.
I mean, as I think all of us would attest, it is better to be lucky than good. I am not lucky. Right? I can't always say that I'm good, but man, I'm still alive, so I'm getting there. Yeah, they've had some interesting occurrences where it's like, well, what the? And I was like, as a platform, you're going to have that, right? Like, you got lucky for 3 years. I'm sorry that that's the impression you left yourself with. The reality is you're in the cloud. Cloud providers fail you. In fact, the longer you're with them, the less incentive they have to not fail you. That's just the reality.
Cloud providers fail you, Azure doubly so.
Yes.
It does seem that way. Because, yeah, all cloud providers have problems, but Azure just seems to have, I wouldn't say more drastic ones, but they just have little, like, things happen. It's like, what is going on here? What demons are loose in your data center?
Well, it seems like at least once a quarter they have something that, like, wipes out an entire region or an entire product globally, or just, like, there's something that, like, touches almost everyone one way or another.
Kind of the nice part about being in the crappy North Central Azure data center is you can't have an outage for a product if your product's not available.
Right. Oh, yeah, product group. So my second case, I've been begging them to take it to the product group, and they have not. But, you know, Maybe Paul Allen got a little salty with Bill Gates one day and got into an Azure data center and said, "Here, Bill, have a nice treat," as he stuffs his thumb drive into a server.
So
I don't
Chris,
think Paul Allen's that guy, but yeah.
um,
Go ahead.
so we had an issue last December, which was not caused by this, but manifested
Wasn't me.
as nope, it was not. It manifested as our old friend Snapport exhaustion.
Oh,
I've been answering a lot of questions about Snapport exhaustion recently. I'm like, no, there is no sign of Snapport exhaustion. They're like, what? What is this? I'm like, oh, let me tell you some tales.
So normally, because with VNet integration, you're not supposed to have Snapport problems when you're talking to your own things. That's supposed to not be a thing. Well, I'm like, okay, maybe the VNet got interrupted some way for a little bit, and Snapport, because we had a giant spike of outbound connections, and Snapport hit, and everything went down. Anyways, as the RCA from that event, we went, this is probably not the thing that actually caused this, but we can't actually tell you what caused this until we can see under the Snapport exhaustion. We've got the okay to go ahead with NAT gateways for the entire network.
Okay.
So Snapports will no longer be a thing.
Wow.
They're not that expensive, and Microsoft is like, we ended up with like a tier 2 or tier 3 Microsoft guy in our meeting for it, because we had so many meetings. And he's like, I recommend this. He's like, they're pretty cheap, and you basically you get your own, you pay a little bit for your own private load balancer endpoint, and you get all the Snapports that come along with like your 6 IPs.
That's amazing. The environment I'm in now has ASE.
Nice.
So kind of its own.
Yes.
But Manischewitz, it's expensive.
Yes. Yes, it is.
By the
it's
way,
also hard to route to.
Right. That is not to equate Jews with expensive things. Just want to say that. I will equate Yiddish with expensive things. But,
oh, Chris.
I'm looking forward to it.
No, that's cool stuff. Like,
I'm waiting for this issue to happen again, and the thing to be able to handle the increased outbound load and actually show me what happened under the hood. Because the whole thing, the whole Azure stack basically collapsed on itself and went, Snapports. It's like Microsoft's like, well, unless you had a network trace during the day, we won't be able to tell you what happened. I'm like, it's your system. Why can't you tell me these things? Then you sit there going, why don't we just host our own stuff? I could tell you what happened then.
This is the thing that every infrastructure person ultimately gets to when you're in the cloud. At some point, you go, yeah, I appreciate that, like, there's some features that I wouldn't have right now if I were hosting my own. And I appreciate that, like, I wouldn't have the flexibility.
Do those some features include an extra zero in your bank account?
No.
Well, yes, but not the ones you were talking about.
Let me be clear. While I truly believe that it is cheaper to run systems in your own data center, and also more reliable to run them in your own data center, the depth and breadth of services that cloud providers offer is hard to match.
Yes.
Oh, I totally agree. You don't need most of them, but
True.
My thing has always been run workloads where they make sense.
Right. If you
some things make sense in the cloud, some don't.
If you are a global e-commerce company, right? If you're Alibaba or Amazon, if you're a global streaming provider, if you're Netflix, by all means, run in the cloud. Like, don't kill yourself. Yeah. The reality is that with CDNs, though, you can use a CDN with a data center anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
as long as your app isn't written horribly.
You know what? If your app's written horribly, it doesn't work any better when you're in the cloud. In fact, it works a lot worse.
Worse. Oh, absolutely.
I
Also,
can cover for a lot of stuff on-prem, right? I can't cover for you in the cloud.
running the workload where it makes sense also applies to local workloads as well. Like, just for complaxity's sake, like let's say you're setting up a remote desktop services environment, and previously someone decided to put your profiles on a separate file server. Well, you don't have a highly available broker, so who cares if your profiles are available when your broker's down? Kind of a thing.
I don't know who would do something like that.
Neither do I. No, never. And and
completely hypothetical.
To be fair, I wasn't calling anyone out for this. It's not just that; it's other things that I've worked with too. It's just like, okay, I understand when you should separate things and make them highly available or have them concentrated, but a lot of times it's like Azure Active Directory sync. Sure, you could put the database on a separate server, but it's a tiny little database that only talks to that thing. Like, why?
Right.
Yeah.
It's only
and that's another thing. I'm a big proponent of HA, all of the things, but it doesn't always make sense. If it doesn't make sense, don't do it.
If your
sometimes becoming highly available can actually make it more complex, less maintainable. Yes. If it's supposed to be a simple system, keep it a simple system.
If your application isn't highly available, like the app servers aren't highly available, the backend probably doesn't need to be highly available.
Right.
Yes,
like,
I agree.
Here's the thing. Like Azure AD Sync, right? Unless you're depending on AD Sync for some kind of customer rapid response thing, you don't need it. It's unnecessary complexity and challenges. And it's actually a perfect example of a solution. Like, you can make it highly available, and maybe there's a use case for that in your environment. But most of the time, you can go sometimes days without a sync, and it has zero impact to your business.
There is when you're using the write back, like when you're letting people do self-service password reset, and that needs to write back down to your on-prem Active Directory.
Sure. Which, by the way, I think there are use cases for it.
We had that in my last place. It was kind of nice.
Yeah, and if you're gonna move to like an Intune managed desktop solution, right?
All the tickets that said reset my password immediately sent them to a website showing them how to reset their password with the self-service portal, and we never got another ticket for it ever again.
I mean, yeah. There's some amazing stuff you can do with it. But there's also, like, it's a lot of noise. Also, interesting enough, like most Azure shops, we use Azure AD Connect. And I've been aware that you can customize Azure AD Connect and Connect Sync.
Yes.
And I've learned some things. Like most things in my career, the things I learned frequently reinforce my previously held positions. Every once in a while, I'm surprised. I'm like, oh, that is a paradigm shift in my understanding of things. Like the first day that I discovered that developers weren't evil. It's like, oh, you're not evil. You have a different approach. There might be reasons to customize AD Sync. They might be really good ones, but they're probably not good enough to do it because it makes just a mess of a system that is kind of hard to troubleshoot.
Do you wanna really hate yourself? Get SharePoint to import custom attributes from Active Directory and use them to customize workflows. Anyways, someone had mentioned
wait,
Windows Auto.
Can I mute you? Because like I don't want to hear it anymore. Oh, sure enough, there we go. That's very nice, William. Just kidding. Windows
be the host.
Autopilot. Oh no.
See, I didn't get to Windows Intune back when I was working with an Azure SCCM shop. We were on the verge of going to Intune because we were just getting all of our stuff. We had just gotten Azure Active Directory P2, and we were getting all that stuff going. We were just starting to use the Azure AD join stuff, so we never went to Intune. So I don't know if they went to Autopilot or not.
I haven't looked much into it. But what I will say is generally when Microsoft offers a replacement or a V2 of an existing solution that's starting to get mature, it's an awful idea. Because they're not very good at when they make a glossy iteration on something, which let's face it, that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Think Windows 8, right? It's a glossy iteration of Windows 7. Windows 7, very quickly, a rock solid OS. There's a reason that people stayed on it for so long. Windows 8 was a glossy turd sandwich. That is, you can look at a lot of Microsoft product and see that when they do the new version of the new better replacement, it's just bad. So, do I think Windows Autopilot is bad? I don't know. But fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice.
Well, they do have a long history of every other version of anything, especially Windows, but practically anything sucks.
Right.
I mean, that got lost in the various versions of Windows 10.
Yeah, and that's a tough one.
Because there's versions of Windows 10 that were quite good and versions that were very bad.
So, remember when Windows 10 came out and they said, this will be the last version of Windows? And then the Windows licensing team said, you know, we actually make money. And they're like, oh.
Forgot about that.
Well, like, Windows 11.
Yeah.
What is Windows 11? It's just another development of Windows 10 with a glossy finish, right?
I hope if we can hold out on 10 long enough, they'll give us our taskbars back. They're slowly getting there. Slowly, more and more functionality is coming back.
Yeah, so my newest laptop came with 11, and then also I have a VM that I use to connect to some customers that is Windows 11, because that was my Windows 11 test box before it went gold. But it's a whole lot of change for the sake of change.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, we're just going to move this because, I don't know, we had an intern that said it was a good idea.
I
something.
have the answer to this. Windows 11 and its GUI is new Coke, right? Pepsi starts to push hard against Coke. Coke goes, we're losing market share. What is it that people like about Pepsi? Oh, we should compete because like Pepsi's going to take market share. You know how many people liked new Coke over Pepsi? None. Do you know how many people prefer Coke, original Coke, over Pepsi? 80%. And it wasn't until Pepsi pushed the envelope that you found out that, you know what, 80% of palates prefer Pepsi over Coke. Pepsi figured out what that formula is, and they were first to market. They did it better. That's who it is, right? Like, if you aren't a Coke drinker, you might be a Pepsi drinker. Coke is never going to get Pepsi drinkers, right? Windows is never going to get Apple users.
No.
They're the 20%.
And moving all your icons to the center isn't going to change that.
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense.
I'm honestly fine with moving the icons to the center. What actually bothers me the most is the right-click menu and having to right-click on the start button to get the task manager. I'm like, God, people say, how would you look at the task manager all the freaking time for whatever reason? And the fact that like I do so much stuff off that right-click menu and it's just like not there.
Right.
Like,
because they want to move you to an Apple device with one button. Right. Um, they're clearly a bunch of Apple phone, Macophile folks within Microsoft. Like, but Apple does it better. No, it doesn't. It does not. Is it great for people that have never encountered a computer that you want to get up to speed relatively quickly? Yeah, the learning curve is like new Windows users. The learning curve is about 2 hours, right? New Mac users, if they're both starting from like no experience at all. Like I pull you, you're uh, a bush hunter from a hunter-gatherer society in sub-Saharan Africa. I pluck you out of the bush and I teach you how to use a computer. I will get you onto Apple an hour sooner than I get you onto Windows.
Well, I mean, that's the same thing with the iPhone. Like the reason why the iPhone is so weird for certain people is because it's designed like they've done all their user testing studies for people, and it's designed like where people will look for people who don't know UI design. This is where they will look for things, and they put the items there, which is great for new people. But if you're used to a phone that follows some paradigm of UI design, it's like, where the crap is it?
Right. As soon as you reach a level of sophistication that allows you to think about how things probably should be done, Apple breaks down for you.
Now the funny thing is, I won an iPad a while back, an iPad Pro, and although I'm not like necessarily a huge fan of how the OS works, the hardware is just so superior that I just find myself liking it a lot.
Yeah.
For what I do for it, that hardware is amazing.
Great. Exactly.
So I won an iPad through work, the place you currently work.
Yeah, so did I.
I never really. I ended up giving it away because it was dumb.
You know the one thing that's made me use my iPad Pro over almost everything else I've had that I've done this with? It easily let me add an ad blocker just straight in the OS without having to root it or mess around with it. I was able to install AdBlock in Safari, and now it's a nighttime, like a website reader.
Okay.
Right. It's an e-reader.
And it's fast. It's very fast.
So, the thing I will say about Android devices
And has good audio.
is that they are frequently underpowered for tablet size things, right? What's crazy is like when you look at their horsepower, they're like low end phones, right? Like the specs on them just are not great. Whereas the iPad is every bit as powerful as an iPhone, and sometimes even more so, right? What you're holding in your hand when you're holding an iPad is a utterly crippled high-end computer, right? Like they gave you all the horsepower and crippled it so it could be just crappy little iPad.
Yes.
Apple, because they own the entire ecosystem, it's a loss leader, or even break even, but it's effectively a loss leader because they get 30% out of the App Store because they own that too. So they know if you buy a device, you're paying money. Whereas a random Chinese manufacturer making your $200 Android device, which is the woefully underpowered one, they don't give a crap.
I will probably end up, once they go over to USB-C, I will probably end up on an iPhone, although I don't think I'll ever end up on a Mac computer. Just because my primary uses of my PC at home are gaming. And you don't.
Yeah.
I won't ever go on an Apple device because sometimes I want my phone to last more than a year and a half. And if you're on an Apple device, the crippleware that they will install on you, once you cross the year and 3 months mark, is insane. Like Apple devices, well known for having some of the best batteries in the industry, right? And then they you get that like year and 3 months, 18
Just
months.
falls over. My
until they decide that you shouldn't be using that device anymore.
Right.
I've-
And then it's
Because
like,
they got
oh,
busted for that.
I want to battery optimize you. Like, you didn't battery optimize me. You crippled me. That battery, like, hey, you know what? I know how to maintain a battery.
I'm still using a Pixel 5, and it's starting to show its age. Like it's getting a little chuggy, and things are getting a little rough, and
Yeah, that's almost 3 years old.
yeah.
Same here.
So
Yeah.
get a little chuggy there.
I
It's
got a-
starting to.
I got a 6 Pro. I skipped the 7, but I'll almost certainly be getting the 8.
Well, the 7 to the 6 was like a half step. It wasn't even like a freaking upgrade.
Oh, that's why I didn't do it, and that's the first time I haven't.
Now, I had a friend who had a 6, and they gave him like $450 in trade for it. Like when he traded up to a 7.
You know what? I'd do that, but I don't give up my devices.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Depends how
I
old they are.
usually hand me down to my kids.
If nothing else, I like my expensive paperweight.
Yeah, they gave
In,
me
like-
like $70 for my Pixel 2, which I was like, buy. Like the charging port was all like I had to use a wireless charging pad and shove it in there and use the phone case to hold the thing in because the port was so loose.
Yep.
Yeah, it was those first couple of gens where they were doing that really bad.
I mean, so you say that, and I actually don't believe that it's just those first couple of gens. I believe that they've been doing it their entire time. It's just that because they got caught,
They got
more
smarter
candid,
about it.
right? Yeah. The reason that I will always stay on an Android platform is I'm not going to mess around with iOS. It's an awful solution. And B, I really want Apple to die.
Anyways,
Like,
gentlemen,
I want the vegans to eat their apples and be done.
I need to run, so it's been a
You do.
pleasure.
Thank you for coming on, William.
Thank you for joining us.
Talk to you guys later.
Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Have a great one. So yeah, William, that guy's magic. I'm not lying. If you are at all in the area where you might cultivate a consultant, knowing William, he's not going to leave his day job, but he might come consult for you. It will take him a while to learn your environment because that's what it takes. But once he does, he's going to do magical things for you. So like throw that guy a couple $100,000, give him 6 months, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Hold on.
So what else? What else is on our topic list?
You know the one. The new one. The old one. The whatever. New.
Yes. Let's see here. What is it's the new 111 new dot old dash new dot old dot back dot 1_1 dot new dot old.
Yes.
So Brian, what should you never name something?
Never, ever, no matter how good or bad of an idea it seems at the time, it's worse than what you think it is by several order of magnitudes. Never name anything whatever new or whatever old, or because inevitably 5 years later your new whatever is going to be new whatever, or old new whatever. Just don't do it. It's stupid. It makes no damn sense. I have one customer that they have their core switches. They have, well, named core, they have new core, and they have old new core, or new old, whatever that. It doesn't matter because it's stupid no matter which way it is. Why would you add new to a name of something that you're deploying that's new?
Um,
Why would you, be it infrastructure, be it server systems, whatever?
do
What?
they also have parkour? I'm just
No.
that would actually be better because it's at least different.
Yes.
So I believe the way that I'm going to sum this up for you is
Yes. Basically. Do you really think you're going to go back and rename that whatever when it's not new anymore and it's just the thing?
right.
No,
Now,
just name it the thing. If you have a good naming standard, it doesn't matter. New has no relevance anyways.
I will say there's a place for um an A-B concept, right? Like if you want to name something like uh thing dash one and thing dash two, it's perfectly acceptable to go back to thing dash one, right? Like if you need to flip flop some things because like you're locked into like I can only have one of the things and somebody was dumb and named it a name that's like super useful. So now I'm going to name it thing dash one, and now I'm always going to be thing dash one, thing dash two, thing dash one, thing dash two. And I'm just going to flip flop between them. You could also name it thing dash A and thing dash B.
Now, what situation would it be that you'd actually need to flip between two different names that
Um,
wouldn't 1,000 times better be served by a C name?
so C names are crutches,
They are very useful
right?
crutches.
Also, there are absolutely places named configs where you're like, okay, that name is suitable for this configuration. But I don't want to really like I'm going to iterate through a name or let's I will give you an example. Load balancers. They have backends. They have health check rules, right? And if all you ever have in a load balancer is like one backend and one health check rule, you're going to name it backend and health check. Or maybe you're smarter than that, but maybe you're not. Fine, whatever. It's a generic thing. Um, if you then change the backend, but you can't modify it, like you want to run side by side, right? For a little while, A/B test, whatever it might be, and you know that you're getting rid of the first one. So name the new, don't name it new because that's an awful name, a dash one. And then just like, what am I on today? I'm on new one, or I'm on back end one, or I'm on back end A. Well, what am I on next time? I'm on back end B. And like, eventually you're going to delete it. So there's only back end B. And people are like, why is it B? I'm like, because we're waiting for the next time we need to change it. And then it's back end A. And then it'll be back end A for a while. Like, don't get obsessed with the name. There are some cases where obsessing over the name is not useful, right? Now, I will say that naming it
You are
backend
correct.
instantiation date is an excellent choice because then you know when it was created. Like, oh, which is the most recent one? Awesome. I can tell from the date. That's a better choice. But sometimes you don't have that luxury with character limits and whatnot.
In the context of a load balancer, yes, because I find that useful for like SSL cert, common name, not common names, but like the nice name, things like that, where you need to. There's going to be something that's going to be changing on some, maybe predetermined, maybe not even predetermined in the case of a load balancer. At some sort of interval, this thing is going to need to be rotated, and you maybe can't necessarily rotate it in place.
Right.
That's when I'll often use like a date. But that's usually not something that's relevant in DNS. On a load
No,
balancer,
God, no.
it may be, but maybe not.
So the reason I say that C names are a crutch, there are absolutely reasons to use a C name. right? In fact, I think you put a CNAME in front of everything, right? Let's just make a friendly CNAME that sits in front of things, that isn't a generic friendly CNAME that sits in front of things, that is indicative of the purpose of it, so that when your backend solution changes, nobody has to change their addressing.
Yeah,
right?
I agree with that for like common, like super common things. You'd never use it for like AD. Well, you wouldn't use it for DNS servers either. But like mail, just the bare mail dot whatever dot whatever. You know what?
So
That should be a CNAME that you can swing around. That you should always be able to repoint to whatever you think is the best mail server for internal clients that don't necessarily, they're not trying to deliver mail. They're not following MX records. They're looking to somewhere to relay through. They want an A or C name. Then you use a C name and you swing it to where it needs to go.
right. Honestly, even an MX record, I want you to use a CNAME. Right. It'll work.
I thought you couldn't use a C name on an MX record.
I'd have to look, but I think it'll work.
That one I'm not 100% sure either way. I thought that was the one exception. Well, not the only exception, but I thought that was one of the exceptions with using CNAMEs.
Okay, yeah, an MX record.
Has to be an A. Well, I mean, it's not an A record, but it has to be. It has to point to an A record. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. It has to be, and yeah. So, I was thinking about. Wow. I can't remember the name of the record. SPF record.
Okay.
SPF, you can point at CNAME.
Yeah.
But
you can get pretty loosey-goosey with SPFs, which is good.
Right. So as dyed-in-the-wool systems guy, the number of times I've wanted to replace a server and had either developers or end users wring their hands over having to change the name that they put into something. Like connection strings are
Why
real.
isn't this a variable?
Right. Well, you know what?
So see, more often it's less often now, but it used to always be, well, we have hard-coded IPs everywhere.
Right.
Well, it sucks for you then. Maybe you're going to have to do a search and replace. What?
So I absolutely think that you should have a variable and you should know how to change your connection string. Right? Because at some point you're going to want to upgrade your database and you're going to want to be able to flip back and forth. DNS is not a particularly efficient way to do that, right? Like don't say, hey, change the DNS record back. And then once we're positive that the consuming system has got the updated DNS, then we'll turn it on again. No, like be able to change your connection string and be positive that you've changed it. But if I want to change the backend system that supports your database or your file system or whatever it is, as a systems guy, I want to do that without having to interact with you. Like, it's not your business if the server is running on server number, DB001 or DB206, right?
Yeah.
You shouldn't care. As long as it serves the database in the same way, that's transparent to you. And it should be. Which is why, like, if you're setting up any kind of database server, sometimes I even go so far as to say, like, if you're setting up a new web server, put a CNAME in front of it and then hand that out. Because then when you want to change that web server down the road, you just do it.
Now, for web server, I'd almost argue towards, if you have the capability, always run it through a load balancer.
Sure, but I want the load balancer to not point an IP address. I want it to point at a
CNAME.
no,
that's fine. And that's fine. I was expanding on what you said, not contradicting it.
Right.
Because then you have a central place to deal with certificates. You have a central place to 2 weeks down the road when they all of a sudden realize, wow, we deployed this with one server and that was stupid. We need 7 to handle the load.
Right. I mean, absolutely. If you're going to do web server, put it load. Make sure you've run it behind a load balancer.
Even if it's only going to one server right now.
Right.
Because it gives you, especially if it's like a decent load balancer, be it an F5, be it a Citrix NetScaler, you have so many more options to like. You have content redirection, you can do rewrites, you can do redirects right on the load balancer for like when a site is down. It gives you so many more capabilities than just send it straight at a single web server. Now, granted, if you're trying to throw a single web server at something, what are the chances of you actually having a load balancer to begin with? Admittedly, probably low. But I'm just saying.
No. There's absolutely management servers and things like that have single web servers. I'm even fine with those having. It's not like you can't get to the original web interface, right? But like throw it behind there in case someday you do need to change it, right? Like, I want to present this pretty. I want to do some weird dashboard, whatever it is, right? You can do really cool things on load balancers. They're smarter, right?
Yeah, they're a lot smarter than your average web server.
They're not web servers, right? Like they don't do the job of a web server, but all the cruft that we've added onto web servers, like, hey, present this pretty, have content, like do ACLs, do rewrites. Like you can do it with a web server, but it's not super great at it. Load balancer is most of them.
Yeah, like, they're designed to do that kind of work.
Right. Like at their heart, the core principle of a load balancer, which is what you get in a lot of cloud providers, they don't do those things. They don't do a lot of URL rewriting. They don't do, fancy ruling and stuff like that. But like any product that isn't just bare bones is going to have some of those features, and you should totally have it.
That didn't work.
That was actually super meta. I love it. Here, let's take that guy away.
Yeah, because I don't even see your ticker.
Oh yeah,
now I realized it was a ticker now lower third, and now I can't find it. Doesn't even show up for me.
Yeah, that was my my constant flow ticker. Yeah. So, yeah, don't new. Don't make it New York.
No. Because then it's New Amsterdam.
Right.
It's New Amsterdam.
Right. It's either Istanbul or Constantinople.
Yes.
Right? If you got to change the name, you got to change the name. But hey, you know what? Just call it the seat of the Eastern Roman Empire.
Nothing could possibly go wrong.
Yeah. So no new news. 1-1. Yeah. File naming also famous. Like, oh, I got to do a backup. .old. Well, I got to hold on to that one. .old. .new.old. New.old. Which one is which? What's the file date? They're all the same.
I probably can't. Oh yeah, I can't. I was gonna try and share the name of our, our group.
I'll share it. Hold on, I can do this. 1 second.
I could have just copy pasted the name. I tried to take a screenshot and dump it in the comments, and that obviously doesn't work. Come on, YouTube. Why can't I have image comments?
I'm gonna abuse our thing. Name of our and blam.
That did absolutely nothing that I can see.
It's a lower third.
Oh, well,
The
it's
title is
not showing up for me.
the name of our discussion chat, and then
Oh,
it's the
okay.
name of our discussion chat. So Brian brought up this topic, and then
Oh,
it
yes,
sat
okay.
for a while, and then one day I got the idea to be funny and edited the name, and then somebody else edited the name, and then it got edited some more. I think we're at like the fourth or fifth iteration of the name.
And it's gotten kind of ridiculous.
It has.
And
It has.
which is amazing in its own way. I mean, it's
Right. Right. So yeah, good stuff. What do you think? You want to wrap it up, or you want to talk about our robot overlords?
oh, which robot overlords?
Oh, I wanted to discuss GPT.
Oh, we can talk about Chat GPT. Didn't really talked about that much. I think we talked about AI generically.
Right.
And I played a lot around with Stable Diffusion, which is for images. But
Right.
ChatGPT I've only played with a little bit.
It's super. It's impressive. Like technically, it's impressive. What's super interesting to me is like as an infrastructure person, like if I want to know how to do PowerShell
Oh
queries,
yeah,
it'll help me
ask
out
it.
there a little bit. And like you can ask it some crazy stuff like, "Hey, how do I write a Splunk query?" Right? But if I ask it how to like solve an error, it gives you the most vanilla generic advice. And I'm like, okay, so I am actually smarter than ChatGPT.
Well, you
That's
have to be very specific.
well, even if you're very specific, if you're dealing with a genuine error or bug, they're so rare that ChatGPT just can't ingest it, right? And that's where
Yeah.
experience comes from. Like similarly, like, hey, ChatGPT, write me a PowerShell script to do this job. It's going to get it generically close, but like there's going to be a couple of things that are off. You'll have to customize it a little bit. You still have to know what you're doing, right? Um, it's going to give you a starting point. What I found when you're asking like really challenging technical questions is it's really just giving you a starting point. And if you've been doing the job for long enough, that starting point is really early. Like it's going to be like a gut check. Like, did you actually do all the basics? It it's the um it's slightly more complex than the is it turned on? Is it plugged in? But not much more.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So I don't remember the exact details, but so Tony, that had been on the show, works
Mhm.
for a top one in the U.S. Crypto exchange. Just playing around, he asked it for a Python. Uh, Basically, he wanted to parse input from one API. He basically wanted to call one API, do some work to something, and then use that to call another API. He must have asked very well because he got something that worked flawlessly and did things that he didn't even think about.
Right. See, here's the thing.
So sometimes it will come up with just something crazy, and then sometimes it just goes stupid and just completely misses the point.
I think as it gets trained better and better, it's going to continue to gobble up and spit out better and better code like things. Because
Yeah.
in general, code is just A to B, right? And A and B aren't
Yeah.
particularly unique. Um,
Yeah.
there aren't a lot of people going like, hey, let me write a new language and find new ways to do things. It's just different ways to plug stuff together and provide
Yeah.
pleasing things, right? But troubleshooting like infrastructure issues, that is not necessarily an A to B problem.
No, because there's no way to feed it. And yeah, that would be a very difficult thing to do.
Which is why I think that ChatGPT might replace developers someday, but it's not going to replace infrastructure
Well,
people.
yeah, it'll be a while, but but there are things that it can do that just are like, how does it even know how to do that? So like you can ask it to provide you with like a DOS prompt or like a Cisco router prompt.
Right.
You can
That's
type
crazy.
in commands and it will reply properly, and you can like you can basically start programming it like it's a router, and like you do a show config and like show
Right.
run, and it will be correct.
It's a
That's
it
weird.
the thing is that it's ingested all of that, right?
Yes,
And
but that's something where it needs extra context, which is like on the it's on the edge of weird. But then there's things where you don't even need context, and like any human would totally understand, where it's just completely oblivious because it's not something that's captured in text that's commonly available and that it was trained on.
right. You know, if you said, "Hey, ChatGPT, my hammer for electrical things doesn't work," it'd be like, "Is it turned on? Is it plugged in?" Like, oh, you misunderstood the question. Right.
Well, what it'll probably
Because it doesn't
do
have the context.
is no, it doesn't. But it's probably read manuals for an electric hammer,
Right.
and it will give you troubleshooting steps
For an
similar to
electric
what you
hammer.
would read in what. Yes, it won't be verbatim. It will be what it's learned is similar to what that looks like.
Right. Um, so the interesting stuff I'd read actually over the weekend is like I read a couple of articles predicting the strife and the gloom and doom and maybe the end of Google because Microsoft is in bed with ChatGPT and ChatGPT is so amazing and like Google's AI is not like their specific AI is not as good as the generalized AI that eh, not general AI but generalized AI that ChatGPT is, right? But you know what? Google's AI behind search is still really good. And in
Well,
many
and
ways
you
better than ChatGPT.
well, and 99.99% of Google's smarts and search prowess was all developed before AI was a thing.
Right. Well, now
So it's
it's gotten better because it's backed by like defeating the search algorithm is harder today because of the AI that backs it. Like it knows what good search lets it that like I've got all the tags, I got all the meta stuff. It's fine. And it's like, no, it's not. And ChatGPT, maybe it can pick that out. Not yet. Um, but like anything, um, with with ChatGPT or with Microsoft, they're going to find a way to mess it up. They had one of the best, like ChatGPT had this great thing, growing volume of users, like so many users that they didn't know what to do with it. They couldn't support it all, right? And they got in
yeah.
bed with Microsoft, and now they've got a paid tier. Which okay, fine, got a paid tier, but we all know
Yeah.
Microsoft. Pretty soon, that's the only tier, or the only tier
Oh,
worth
yeah,
using.
guaranteed. Well, and it's almost a necessity. The amount of horsepower you need to run Chat GPT on compared to there's so like Stable Diffusion, you can run that at home with a decent video card. You cannot run Chat GPT at home with any number of video cards that you can reasonably acquire. you would need a solid server with like 8 of the NVIDIA like data center GPUs in it.
I mean,
Many
you need
terabytes of RAM. Just their model is huge. There's no way to run that on reasonable hardware right now.
right. And that so what's interesting to me is I think Chat GPT is going to expose a thing about AI that I think I kind of always intuited, but a lot of the people that were super gung ho for AI didn't really catch on to, which is like everyone's like, oh, generalized AI, it's going to take over the world, or like it's going to be great. It's really, really energy efficient unless it's slow. Like wet
Well,
chemistry, super good at it. Like I'm a great generalized
and
AI.
not particularly slow even. So
Sure.
generalized AI right now is a pipe dream. It's going to take quite a while before that happens. We can do very specific things relatively passably.
Right.
You can ask Chat AI or Chat GPT to write you a short poem, and it will do something that's a short poem.
Right.
More complex tasks or tasks that require specific knowledge, the deeper you dive, and that goes into kind of the programming stuff we were talking about. There are some things that it can do well in that sphere, but in a generalized sense, it's horrible at it.
Right.
The same goes for like image generation, which I'd say right now AI is better at image generation than it probably is at generic text generation. But I think image is actually an easier problem. I know it sounds
No, it is
kind of
because you're
backwards, but text is so.
the thing about image generation is that um, I'm never gonna get out of an image AI um, Picasso esque work, right? Like I'm not
Oh,
gonna get
yeah.
something innovative and communicative, right? I'm gonna get iteration on a theme. If it's already been done, it will be able to reproduce it in an interesting way, right? It's not going to be able to create things for me that are new and different and unique. Like, had there never been anime, we wouldn't be able to do anime
Well,
AI
no, because it
graphics,
needs to know what anime is. And
right?
that's the thing, because the way it learns is very similar to how a human artist learns. I mean, you're effectively ingesting images and you're weighting paths in a neural matrix.
What's interesting about most artists is there's inevitably some moment in an artist's life where they where it clicks that part of what art is disruption, and no AI is going to, because of the way they're trained, it's always collective, right? It's never how
Correct.
do I go off the rails a little bit,
Yes. And that's the thing. It can't innovate.
right?
It can mash up as many styles as you want. It can create things that appear new, and they are new creations, but they're not innovative creations. They're
Right.
just take 50% of this artist and 12.5% of this artist and 25% of this artist and another 12.5% of this artist, and it will create you something that is literally what you asked for. It will be something that no one has ever seen before. But is it innovative? No, it's only as innovative as whoever wrote the prompt to generate that.
Right.
It's just a combination of those styles. Yeah, it learned how to do those styles, and then you told it how to mix those together, what proportions. And what it creates is something that's never been seen before, but that doesn't necessarily make it innovative.
It
At
makes it
this
unique.
point, maybe not forever. It's unique, but is that the same as someone coming up with a new style that's never been conceived of. That wasn't a combination of I was inspired by this and I was inspired by that, because that's basically what it's doing. It is being inspired in its learning process for these styles.
Yeah, in a crude sense, and maybe it could
Right now
eventually
it
get to
can't.
something. Maybe it can get to
Yeah,
a
maybe.
sophisticated state where it like can riff on that theme. Like I was inspired by this style and this style, so I combine them in this unique way. It can't do that now, right? But
See, and that would be an indication, that sentence that you just said, where it's I was inspired by this style and this style, and I decided to do this.
right,
That's where I would draw the line, where it'd be like, that is innovation, even if it's a combination of other things, but it's a combination of other things that it decided to do because it thought that it would be a good idea.
right. It's interesting. It just occurred to me that AI image generation is to art what um, porn is to cinema, because porn is videographic in nature, right? But like it's just recombinations of the same things that have been clickbait and made people feel comfortable. It's a novel enough to get you to look at it, right? But there's nothing new about it.
Yeah.
Not really. Not in any like artistic way. Now, that does beg the question of like, is the 14th movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe cinema, or is it porn? Like, are they doing anything really new? Like, are they just doing a crude form of AI delivered film?
Yeah.
Super entertaining,
Yes.
but
Yeah, and this is good. So if humans never created cell shading, it wouldn't. First, I wouldn't even know what the term was. But yes, you're mostly correct, but with caveats. Because if a human in their mind, like, so say I'm trying to write a prompt for an AI image generator, and I kind of describe what cell shading is, it will be able to create that, but
right,
only because someone told it exactly how to get those results.
right. A human has to conceive of it first, right? Um, so this is an interesting question. I don't believe this is true because the blending and um, it's it's iterative, but it's also um, it's reductive, right? It's it's taking things and reducing them into a whole. Fractals um, are exponential growth.
Or, well, I mean, it can go both directions, but it's more the self similarity is probably what most people would consider the fractal nature. And you actually can see it if you do AI image upscaling, because you'll start to get weird artifacts where if you try and upscale something too much, it'll start to see things in the noise that it thinks. So, all right, a little bit
So,
of background.
well,
The way that something like Stable Diffusion works, what it does is it generates basically a random field of noise and then looks for what you ask for in that random noise. In a way, that works very similar to how the human brain works when it's like looking at clouds or looking at static. I mean, static is a little too random, but when it's trying to figure out what something is, if you're looking for something specific, you'll eventually see it. That's kind of how the AI works. So it generates randomness, and then if you ask for the image of a woman, well, it tries to see where it can find the image of a woman in that from what it understands the image of a woman to be.
Right.
And then it reiterates that until it becomes the image of a woman by just basically overwriting the static with that.
Right.
Now, when you
So,
do AI upscaling, depending on how you do it, the same thing can happen. Because when you upscale an image, when you just like make it bigger, you make all the pixels bigger, and then you subdivide them, you end up with noise on the fringes, and then sometimes it'll add detail that doesn't make sense or didn't originally exist, which is kind of what he was asking.
right. So the interesting thing about that is like when you introduce that noise and it detects it as a pattern, it may
Yeah.
replicate that, right? Um, and it may propagate that noise in weird ways because like, oh, I see a thing that I need to do here. Um, what's interesting about that is you are more likely to end up with um, tessellations with repeated errors than you are to end up with fractals because and if you were to look at a tessellation set with repeated errors, it might look similar to a fractal, but if you really look at them closely, you're like, okay, this is just error and this is fractal because fractals are math.
Well, it depends on how strict you are on the definition of fractal.
I
No, I'm serious.
I am strict.
Because
I am strict on the definition of fractal. It's a mathematically generated infinite reduction,
uh,
or
not
or
quite, but
expansion.
so what most people will think of is, say, like the Mandelbrot set, where you can start zooming in on one of the edges and you see things that are self-similar. It won't be exactly the same because all those things are based on it's basically the function with an imaginary component, whatever the escape value is of that. It's whether it's colored or not, or what color it is.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
there's human intervention pieces, right? But and there's
yeah.
input.
So correct. But what most people think of as fractal is where you start zooming in on something or zooming out on something and you see self similarities. And that's something super, super common in AI image generation. It's very easy to accidentally get an image where the model has like 6 sets of arms, or like it'll be like half a body and then another half a body and then the head and like normal, and it just gets like weird. It'll be these weird.
It's weird, but like a person sensitive to humans are actually pretty good at math, right? You look at the self similarities and you're like, okay, I see the self similarities, but I also see the differences. And if I stare at it for a little bit, I actually start to see like where the difference branching was, right? AI is not going to do that. Like you're going to get 6 arms,
No,
but
it
you're
does
never going to get 200, right? And
it well, you could.
I mean,
But it's just when you zoom into an image and try and basically enhance,
yeah,
it'll start picking things out that it thinks are whatever you asked for. I don't know if that's what he's asking about, but that's something that I've observed
yeah. I mean,
while playing
like
around with this
his
stuff.
thing, what his question was, do you think with enough iterations of AI blending styles that fractals would emerge? And the answer is no, because blending of styles doesn't get you to a place where you end up
Yes, I
with something that looks like a fractal. No matter how bad it is at predicting what a human hand is, You're
Yes.
not going to end up with this weird ad infinitum appearance. I actually don't think you'd even get it in like doing AI based like image enhancement, right? Because while it's going to pick things out of the noise, when it expands that, it's going to find new noise that it's going to do weird things to. You're never going to get that weird self similarity at scale large enough to be at all determinable as like fractal.
See, once again, it's I totally understand where you're coming from, but I I think I can infer where what he was getting at, maybe where you it's almost kind of emergent behavior where you kind of start mixing styles together, and all of a sudden you get something that's new, but
You know what I'm going
it's
to say?
almost a new take on something that existed, but it's what it's
If
kind of a merge.
right, if it ever gets to the point of generating fractals or fractal like things, that will be the point where I actually start to be afraid of AI.
That's the thing. Like
Because
strict fractals are easy.
right,
If you ask it for a fractal, it'll give you a fractal. But fractal-like behavior,
right,
I think I kind of understand what he's getting at.
yeah, it's that.
It's more nuanced than just fractal as a mathematical, well,
No,
a visual representation of a mathematical concept.
and I understand that too. I just like when I look at a fractal, whatever it is, and I think this is true for most people that look at them, they're like, oh, that looks random. Like, yeah, there are similar shapes, but it looks random. But then when you start to look at it, it's like, okay, it's not random.
Yeah,
And it's
definitely
also
not random.
like, it's infinite, right? And the
Yep.
whole point of like image AI is not infinity, it's destination. Like it's trying to reduce to a single point. Like I'm trying to get you the thing. Whereas fractals are like, I'm a thing that exists because of rules.
Well, with the I mean, because you can do the same thing. I mean, you could zoom
Yeah,
in
I can.
infinitely or
Right.
out infinitely. That's a bad quantify, and that's not what you're asking for. I get that,
Right.
but it's not necessarily that. I mean, the AI has no goal. It has what you've asked it for. Sometimes it hits, sometimes it misses.
So what I would say, you use the term emergent. And what I would say is that fractals are an emergent result of a visual representation of specific mathematical formulas. Right.
I wouldn't use the term emergent with fractals. It's
maybe not emergent, but
yeah, but I know what you're trying to say, and I can't think of better words.
right.
But I
just
don't think emergent applies.
Right. I don't anticipate that AI gets to the point of being able to get, because its goal is super specific and it's actually really dumb. Like there's no creativity in this thing. And its point is not to iterate infinitely. Its point is to iterate to a finite conclusion. Right?
Yeah, it iterates to the point where you stop it, because if you let it go too long, it just fucking goes off the rails and it turns into a mess.
Right. Which also is not a fractal, right? Like it doesn't.
Yes, correct.
I guess, you know what? A million monkeys on a million typewriters eventually produce Shakespeare.
Yes.
Right. So is it possible that the AI image generation, if you let it run long enough, produces Shakespeare or produces a fractal? Yes. Technically possible. But is it
And,
like,
and
is
actually,
it reproducible? No.
I think the reverse would happen. You let it run for too long, it just turns almost into randomness. It turns into just overcooked garbage. At least with
It probably
images.
turns into a white or a black screen at some point, right? Like,
Gray.
great, right. It turns into a monochromatic mush shade. If you stop it just before then, you might end up with the caca rainbow.
Uh, maybe. Depends on what you're asking for.
By the way, have you heard of the caca rainbow?
Yes, only very recently.
Right. Me too. But I was like, oh my lord, it's so awful. But yeah, apparently the new rage in nursery decoration is to decorate your nursery for your upcoming child with a palette that can only be described accurately as the caca rainbow,
Yeah. It's,
which I will say might make cleanup less urgent, and that's disgusting.
hmm.
Oh, they flung poop on the wall. Oh, that stripe is clean. No. Anyway,
But yeah, but the one thing I will say is AI has probably increased, maybe not tenfold, probably at least fivefold in the last year.
yeah, it's taken
Con-
like
Continuing
anticipate-
at that pace, if our compute power can keep up, which it's not even close.
no. So what's interesting to me is like there's been all this hand wringing over like the energy costs of crypto, right? Don't worry, AI is going to eclipse it in like a year.
Yeah, it's already pretty obscene.
All right. Well, we've nearly 215'd it.
Oh yeah, it's probably about that time.
So you should post that comment.
And,
I'll show
everyone's. Oh yeah, well yeah,
that.
and we're not even close to being at that level.
Oh my lord. No, we are not.
What do you think? Maybe I don't want to say 1,000 years, but I feel that's in the right ballpark, scale wise.
So when
Is
you
that a level 3 or a level 4 civilization?
I think
Dyson
that's
spheres.
I think that's level 4.
Okay.
The thing that, so people talk about like, oh, what does it take to build something like that? I don't care what it takes to build it, right? Like, yeah, we don't have all the tech, but we're probably within a somewhere between 20 and a couple hundred years of the tech to build something like that. What we will not have for a long time is the ability to deal with the energy. Like, yeah, we need all this energy, right? But like, you can't create or destroy energy. Like, here's the thing.
So you're worried about
Turning
surplus.
energy into mass.
So
Mass
if
into
we
energy.
ever,
Yeah.
if we ever did get at the point of like seriously considering building a Dyson sphere, we would probably start with one ring and then do another ring at 90 degrees and then start filling in the gaps as we needed additional energy. It would probably take from the first ring completion, which that alone would take an incomprehensible amount of materials and resources and time.
The thing you got to remember is anything you put in there is an insulator, right?
Yeah.
So as you fill in, you start to capture the energy.
Correct.
If you get it too filled in, the energy quantity grows because you've insulated it from the outside. Now,
Yes.
when you think about like, oh, we can convert it to electricity, and that's great, but electricity turns into heat.
you're also reflecting energy back into that star, which is going to affect how that star is behaving.
Right. So you have to have the level of control you have to have on that energy intake is so intense. Like you basically have to limit any, uh, the energy chain has to go star converted to useful energy, whether it's light or electricity, to heat. And all of the heat has to go out the back end.
Yeah.
Has to. Reliably every time. Otherwise, you're screwed.
Well, because heat is a bigger problem in space than most people think. Because okay, yeah, that space around you is at almost it's considerably above absolute zero, but it's pretty damn cold.
Right.
Uh, Shedding heat is still a major problem because there's not enough matter to actually get that heat away from you, and you can only radiate so much as infrared, UV, well, anything in the electromagnetic spectrum. You can only radiate so much
Right.
before
At that,
you yourself are a star.
you have to convert mass into energy at a useful and non-destructive rate.
Yes.
Or um, you have to turn energy into mass, which we have not done so far.
No, and that's
Um, and
probably
that would be
very
useful.
difficult.
Like if you could turn energy back into mass, then you could radiate heat pretty effectively because you can
Yes.
create mass to be able to radiate.
Because otherwise, if you could like snap your fingers and create a Dyson sphere without the appropriate technology to accommodate for that stuff, it would effectively evaporate very
Right.
quickly.
Right. So Dyson sphere levels of power. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The question is, can we get AI that doesn't need Dyson levels spheres of power that can help us create a Dyson sphere?
We need much better CPUs. Well, more GPUs is what we use now, but
Let's be honest, GPUs are just better CPUs.
for very specific workloads, yes.
We figured out how to use them well. We've gone through this in compute, right? Every once in a while, there is a paradigm shift in how compute technology is used. Um, is a GPU more powerful than a Cray supercomputer? By some metrics,
Yeah,
but not by
but
others.
in fact, maybe even by most metrics, but there's metrics where it is not.
Right. So more to come. Will we overheat
Yep.
the Earth with AI?
I
There's
mean,
a
probably
question.
not, but it's
Will environmentalists say, you know what we need to solve the climate crisis? We need more AI. Uh, sorry.
it definitely has the capacity to solve a lot of problems
Sure does.
and create new ones.
Absolutely.
New and exciting problems, and you know how I like new and exciting problems.
Well, may you live in interesting times.
Yes.
Uh,
Ancient Chinese curse.
that is correct. All right. On that note,
Yeah, it's about that time. We're well over 2 hours.
uh,
I was hoping to make it an hour.
success.
Yes. Oh, what we got? Ah, good night. That's Adam. If you didn't notice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
And we will see you next time. Hopefully
Yeah.
within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we're gonna try for either Oops Ops Origami or Fridge Scribbles at least every 2 weeks. We're working on that. Hopefully, hey, like and subscribe. That means you,
Ding the bell.
whoever's listening to this. Yeah, so there's a link in the description for the Rumble channel. Definitely like that because we need. It was a low number. It was only like 25 subscribers to be able to go live there, and we don't currently have enough. Despite the fact that we get more interactions on Rumble than on YouTube. So more views, not live obviously because we are not live there because we cannot be, but we get more thumbs up, thumbs down, and more views on Rumble than we do on YouTube. So I'd really like to be able to go live there. I have a
Right.
feeling it would do good. There's not a ton of live content on Rumble. It's only a handful, so yeah, we'll see. Not that I really care about that stuff, but at the same time, I want more people to interact with because that's what makes a show interesting. That's why I'm glad. Obrazu? I don't even know how to say that. All right. Oh, good. Good. Thank you.
All right. You guys have a good night, man.
Yeah, everyone have a good night. We'll see you hopefully in a less than embarrassing amount of time.